Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Doug O'Brien. Thank you all very much for joining us this evening. I'm going to be playing the part of James Buchanan, the former president, for tonight's presentation. And along with me are Bob Basillo, who is playing the part of Professor Samuel Haldeman. And to my right is Tom Englert, who will be playing the part of Horace Haldeman. And to my immediate left is Ken Pandozzi, who is Paris Haldeman for this evening. We are all tour guides at Wheatland, President James Buchanan's house, and from time to time, such as this evening, we participate in living history reenactments of the type that we hope you will enjoy tonight. President Buchanan and Henry Haldeman were great friends over many, many years, and they did visit from time to time here at Locust Grove, and the president always enjoyed his times with Mr. Haldeman and his wife. Mr. Haldeman has passed away now some 18 years. The Civil War is over for 2 years. We are in 1867. And the sons of Henry Haldeman have invited James Buchanan to their home to reminisce, essentially, about the good old days in the old neighborhood to try to take Mr. Buchanan's mind off the political troubles of the day. As you probably recall, Mr. Buchanan retired from public life for all intents and purposes when he left the White House in 1861. He did remain in contact with a number of editors and political friends around the country, but for the most part was spending his time with close personal and political friends in the Lancaster area. He has come here to Haldeman House on this fine summer day to forget all about that for a while. We are gathered around a table in this magnificent ballroom, gentlemen, with a fireplace at either end. This marble top table, it is absolutely exquisite. I can hear the rippling of the Susquehanna River just outside the window where it flows over its rocky bed, being fast but shallow in this particular spot. Frankly, it is musical. And we have had a fine, fine feast, and I thank you all. Samuel, particularly to you, because of this wonderful repast that you provided me and this excellent conversation. It has been a delight indeed. And to you, Horace, for your service in the Mexican War, shall we say, all right? And to Paris to show the gumption to go on the gold rush in California, extraordinary to say the very least. But raise a glass now, gentlemen, if you will, to your father. Here's to Henry Haldeman, who is the father of all three of you, certainly, and through you, it leaves us a great legacy. Thank you all very much, and thanks to Henry.
Here, here.
Now, I have a question for you, Samuel. It seems to me some years ago, I wrote you a letter of introduction for your first trip to Europe. And I've heard since that you've been back many times, yet I have not a word of your adventures.
Yes, I owe you much for your courtesy. You know, we're a very young country, and our scientific community is just now beginning to develop. We need to learn from those who have come before us. We need to expand and enlarge on their knowledge, as well as our contemporaries. I traveled to Europe to increase my knowledge, to establish scientific relationships. I have been very well received by the scientific communities there, and have been invited to become a corresponding member in many professional societies.
Congratulations.
Well, it is true that you travel not necessarily for pleasure alone. It's always work-related, fulfilling your need to know more knowledge. While your wife Mary is always very anxious for you to get home, and on one trip to promote your books, you wrote to her from Paris and said, "I do not care about making this trip, for I had much rather be at my usual pursuits. This trip is all lost time, and it does not aid my special studies, and I have not written one page of print since I've left home."
Well, my work is my pleasure. Life is short and I have much to do. I prefer to avoid frivolities, the unnecessary. A friend complained once about the brevity of my letters. As I wrote to my wife on one of my trips, everything that I see or would write about is already available, much better described in books.
Nevertheless, Samuel, if I may say so myself, personal observations, especially from someone like you, are always very, very interesting. Now, Horace, something has bothered me for quite a long time. In 1861, when hostilities broke out, our friend Simon Cameron offered you commission as a full colonel in the United States Army because of your service in the Mexican War. Yet you declined. Instead, you chose to become a captain in the Confederate Army. Is your new home in Texas so alluring?
Well, yes, my friend, it is very alluring. From the moment I got to Texas, I fell in love with it. I considered it very delightful and extremely healthy. And when my wife moved, we made our home there. You must understand the passion and urgency that Samuel had in us, his brothers, to help him collect things from all the areas, insects, birds, snakes, spiders, shells, etc., etc. I was his southern source, and I could hardly leave the place for searching in the area. There was one time we were camping in Mexico, in Jalapa, Mexico, and we were next to a stream for several days. When I could find time, I searched for shells without success. I even had some of my soldiers looking for things. I recall also one time Samuel sent me a letter. He was very concerned about my performance, and he feared for all the collection that was being sent to him. And I explained I was very busy. I had a great deal to do. I was the senior master of the commissary and the post adjutant, and I was in charge of all of the work building, etc., and all the purchases, etc. But I still managed to collect insects for him now and again. And I wrote to him and I told him I found more since my arrival here at Fort Gates. I hope to go into the river again, but I guess it was much too high because of the recent rainfall. I recall another time I sent him a whole quill of insects collected on the banks of the Leona River. And we were coming back with my mounted infantry after attacking Comanche warriors. And I could have procured more, but the air and water was just so cold, I had to remove all my clothing to go into the river for fear of freezing with the wet clothing going home.
Well, yes, and in fact it mattered not where we traveled nor what our hardships may have been. Brother Samuel was always agitating and wanting more and more samples. I recall my own challenge during my wagon trip to the California Gold Rush in 1849, when I discovered that all of my alcohol for insect preservation had been nearly all evaporated due to not being sealed properly. And to this very moment, I have never been able to relate the thousands of insect species that I have had to pass over or sometimes pass around without selection and preservation.
Well, Paris was never one of my better suppliers. I recalled him relating to me his being north of Sacramento City on one of his gold searches. His party was surrounded by 100 Indians laying in ambush. Here he was surrounded by a plethora of collectibles to add to my collection that you all know that's in my library. It included hatchets, bows and arrows, yet he brought not one item back to me.
I would suspect he was a bit distracted just at that particular moment. But what I want to know is, did you bring back any gold?
Well, I would say that, in a manner of speaking, of course, I did bring back some gold nuggets of warm memories and fond friendships, but the actual cold, shiny metal, not so much. In fact, I must say that we are even lucky to be alive. In fact, on the way to California, we had to pass through a canyon of 5 miles long, which took us a day and a half to get through. We saw 50-some-odd wagons just lying about the road, scattered, all broken into pieces. Why, in some places, we even had to use ropes to let our own wagons down. There were mules lying around dead, with their necks and their legs just broken over the rocks. And before arriving to Carson River, we had to pass through a desert of 45 miles. And there was nothing, no water, just wells of salt water, and the latter part of the road was nothing but desert sand. And there are hundreds more wagons just left because their animals cannot pull them. Many of us are on the brink of death due to our lack of water, and we were barely able to speak. There are mules and all other animals just dying along the roads, some dead because of the lack of water, and their owners could not get them through. And for the last 2 weeks of our journey, we had nothing but coffee and bread to survive on as our rations and provisions ran out.
Yes, my dear Paris, life is precious, as are friendships. Neither should be taken for granted. Yesterday I received a delightful letter from my daughter Eliza, who is studying in Paris. It is about friendships regained. She had a falling out with her best friend, Mary Cassatt, the artist, who were both in Paris for reasons neither could completely understand. At the initiation of Mary, they reunited on the steps of the Louvre, and they took a walk in the gardens of the Tuileries. It was a lovely moment in time, with lovely imagery. As today at this table is a lovely imagery, James. Our friendship didn't need to be regained. It is redoubled, it is multiplied.
Samuel, your sentiments are heartfelt. But gentlemen, I fear it is time for this elder statesman to return to his quarters in Lancaster. But before I go, if I may follow up on what you said, Samuel, I recall a quote from the German philosopher Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. He said that joy shared is joy doubled. And indeed, I think that's what has occurred here this evening. A fine meal, excellent company, great conversation, and a renewing, a redoubling, if you will, of our friendship and our enjoyment. Thank you all very much. And please, may I implore you, as time allows, come visit me at Wheatland.